Hello, this is Simon from Film Stories. Thank you so much for listening to this Film Stories Podcast Network podcast. And thank you too to the lovely folks at Prop Store who have sponsored it. Prop Store is a place where you can bid on memorabilia from the movies, and Prop Store also has a live auction taking place from September the 4th to the 6th, 2025 in Los Angeles, California. Now, don't know about you folks, I'm not in Los Angeles, California, so I'm instead I've already registered and I've been looking at the entire catalogue, which you can find at propstore.com. And boy, have I found some stuff to waste my pocket money on. Right, sit back for this. As well as stuff from Aliens, from Blade Runner, from Star Wars, all the classy stuff that I'm supposed to want. The thing I most want from this auction is a life-size, cable-controlled animatronic Emperor Penguin from Batman Returns. Do you remember 1992's Batman Returns and how ropey the penguins looked at the end? Well, I want one of those in my office. I'm also quite taken by Walter White's white Y-fronts from Breaking Bad, as worn by Bryan Cranston. The elastic looks a little bit saggy on them, but, you know, needs must. This is memorabilia. You can find the entire auction catalogue at propstore.com, and that auction takes place September the 4th to the 6th. 2025.
This podcast is supported by Progressive, a leader in RV insurance. RVs are for sharing adventures with family, friends, and even your pets. So if you bring your cats and dogs along for the ride, you'll want Progressive RV insurance. They protect your cats and dogs like family by offering up to $1,000 in optional coverage for vet bills in case of an RV accident, making it a great companion for the responsible pet owner who loves to travel. See Progressive's other benefits and more when you quote RV insurance at Progressive.com today. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Pet injury is an additional coverage and subject to policy terms.
Hello, this is Simon Brew. I'm the editor of Film Stories magazine. A very warm welcome to the Film Stories podcast.
Sorry about that. I literally had to fly in from outer space.
Come with me.
And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
And movies that had stories.
The story just sucks them in.
This is just the beginning.
Stories. We would be honored if you would join us.
Hello, and a very warm welcome to Film Stories with Simon Brew. I am Simon Brew. As always, there's absolutely everything you need to know about me. The aim of the podcast, though, is given away by the title. I'm here to talk of the stories of films, and I tend to talk about production stories, marketing stories, release stories, distribution stories, all the ingredients, really, that go towards making the films that we know and sometimes love. Just that, the films that we know and sometimes love. The films I tend to cover on this podcast lean more towards the mainstream than anything else. They're films I'm interested in or invested in to some degree. I try not to do snark. I try not to punch down. This podcast is a celebration of cinema and a real appreciation that somehow films manage to get made. Thank you to everybody who's come back after I've had a brief summer break from the podcast. I'll do more post the credits and just explain where things are up to if you stay to the very, 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 very end. In the meantime, this podcast is a very proud part of the Film Stories Podcast Network, a network of over 50 shows covering film, TV and games. There's lots and lots to choose from if you just give Film Stories Podcast Network a search, and hopefully you'll find some more things to entertain your eardrums with. But for this episode, then, I'm going to get cracking by taking us back to 1999 and a film that was controversial even before it made it into cinemas. As always, I'm going to set things up with a clip from the trailer, and I'm going to come to this film story the other side of this.
You know, you could be a model. It's too bad you're not sexy.
I can be sexy.
You know what would be super duper sexy? If you lost all the clothes.
Huh?
I'm sick of sleeping with these insipid Manhattan debutantes.
Ow!
Nothing shocks them anymore.
But you can relax. I have a mission for you. Why I Plan to Wait by Annette Hargrove.
Paradigm of chastity and virtue.
Introduce her to your world of sex, drugs, and what else do you do? She's young, supple.
She'll be my greatest victory.
You don't stand a chance.
Care to make a wager on that?
If I win, then that hot little car of yours, mine.
And if I win?
I'll give you something you've been obsessing about ever since our parents got married. Happy hunting, Sebastian.
we have a first-time director. A first-time director who had to go down onto his knees to get the member of cast that he wanted. And then one hell of a controversy blowing up even before the film was in cinemas. Let's dig into the story of 1999's Cruel Intentions, written and directed by Roger Kumble, based on Les Liaisons Dangereuses. My French is just brilliant, isn't it? I knew you were thinking that. And with a cast led by Sarah Michelle Gellar with Ryan Phillip, Reese Witherspoon, Selma Blair, Joshua Jackson, Tara Reid, also, if you go down the list. So, as Brian Raftery writes in his excellent book, it's a really good book, Best Movie Year Ever, the era of, inverted commas, teen-sploitation films was rife at the end of the 1990s. And so this I kind of take to mean the kind of horror films that involved young teen actors coming through. But also there were these high school movies as well, and this kind of group of performers all coming through together. For the studios, this was gold. This was a bunch of films that cost, rarely more than $15 million to make, would come up with a handsome return at the box office, and DVD was exploding, so you sat back and counted all the cash. A good example, I mean, the Scream films came out of this era, but also for the purposes of this story, the 1997 horror I Know What You Did Last Summer, which has just been unsuccessfully remade. The Craft was around. You remember The Craft? Clueless as well. It's a great big collection of films. Roger Kumble then was in his early 30s at this stage when he decided to, I'm going to have to pronounce this again, don't judge me, when he decided to take the plunge on a remake of Les Liaisons Dangereuses, Dangerous Liaisons, which had been successfully filmed just a few years before, actually, a decade or so before, as Dangerous Liaisons for directors Stephen Frears, Glenn Close, Michelle Pfeiffer, John Malkovich in that, 7 Oscar nominations, 3 wins. And in fact, within a year of Stephen Frears' Dangerous Liaisons coming out, there was one from Milos Forman of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest fame, who made Valmont, based and inspired on the same story. But go back to Roger Kumble. I mean, there he was in his 30s, and he hadn't made a film. He was writing, as I'm going to come to in a minute. But he was hugely inspired by a 1995 movie from Todd Solondz called Welcome to the Dollhouse. And as Roger Kumble recounted to Cosmopolitan, I cite Cosmopolitan a lot, right? He just said, wow, clucked up high school. I think that's what he said. Never seen this. And he described it as so dark. One of those moments where you're just walking across the street. The idea popped into my head to do Dangerous Liaisons in a high school. And he said, I mulled it over for a year, but going back to Welcome to the Dollhouse, and it's a hell of a film, he said, that movie had an incredible effect on me. I realised you could actually portray high school as mean and truthful. We get that a lot now, less so at the time. So, as quoted in the official press notes, Kumble, the ones that were issued around the time of the film's release, Kumble knew it would be a fight to get a major studio to allow him to direct a film. And he just, as he told the press notes, I planned on writing a really vicious, low-budget, keywords, low-budget, update of Dangerous Liaisons and then going out, raising $1 million and directing it. And he said, I had no idea it would turn out the way he did. But then his immediate priority around this point was a play he was doing called D-Girl with David Schwimmer. It was his second high-profile play after 1993's play Pay or Play, which is really confusing to say. A play called Pay or Play. And Pay or Play had earned him an award for comic writing from LA Weekly. Now, D-Girl was also picking up gongs, and this was a playwright on the way up. And he had, because he was on the way up in Los Angeles as well, around Hollywood, so he was getting the attention and getting the interest of agents and studios. And so he knew he had a moment. He had this moment where the attention was on him and he needed to kind of seize that moment. So he did what most of us would do. He went to Mexico for a couple of weeks and went and wrote Cruel Intentions, or Cruel Inventions as it was originally. It took him 12 days-ish to do the first draft. I think that was 97 he did that. There was still, of course, a way to go because he'd still never made a film. But it was a producer by the name of Heather Zegan who would connect Roger Kumble to the person who could get Cruel Inventions made. Now, producer Neil Moritz is a man who's done a fair few remakes. I'm going to get through this with a straight face. Who's done a fair few remakes under the banner of his production company, which is called Original Film. However, in the 1990s, he was a producer very much on the way up. And his big breakthrough hit was I Know What You Did Last Summer, which gave him a box office hit with Scottish director Jim Gillespie. Ryan Phillip and Sarah Michelle Gellar were in that. And it was Heather Zegan who put Neil Moritz and Roger Kumble together. They had a conversation, and I mean, this was starting to get somewhere because Neil Moritz had a relationship with Sony, and all of a sudden the pieces were kind of falling roughly into some degree of place. It was Moritz then who said, well, why don't you go and meet Ryan Phillip, Sarah Michelle Gellar, see if they're interested. Is it Philip or Philippe? I'm going with Philip just for this. Sorry, Ryan, if you're watching. And a meeting was arranged, and it didn't take long for Gellar and Ryan to sign up to this particular project, Cruel Inventions. And that was 2 of the 3 key roles in the film sorted. I'd say 4 key roles, really. I'm just going back. 2 of the 4 key roles in the film sorted. And I don't know, I think this was sort of starting to move at some degree of speed, because Kumble was also, under the terms of this deal that was being struck with Sony in the end, going to be able to direct the film. And so, yeah, okay. Now, Sarah Michelle Gellar at this point had built her audience up with Buffy the Vampire Slayer, a very heroic role. And she was keen to get involved, but in the less heroic role in Cruel Inventions. And she was kind of resisting the kind of goody-goody part in the film. And as she put it, that she'd come out of soap operas before she got to Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and she was used to playing less savoury parts in soap operas. But the audience didn't really know her for that, because there she was, this huge breakout TV star hero. So, Gellar was just around, I think she was just around 20 at the point that she signed up to Cruel Inventions. And I mean, going back to Brian Raftery's excellent book, Gellar eventually persuaded the producers to cast her in the role of Catherine. And so, as Raftery writes, it was a decision that rattled executives at the television network, the WB, not to mention her representatives. And Gellar is quoted as saying, "My manager said, people are starting to love you. Why would you want to ruin it?" The manager and her party company not long afterwards. And also Joss Whedon, for it is he, the creator of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and there's a man whose star has fallen. Look him up if you don't know why. He wasn't particularly pleased at the idea of her doing Cruel Intentions. He would describe the film as, quote, porny, Porny, before the release of the film. And as Gellar said, I was mad at him for that, but I don't think he'd seen the movie at that time. And Sarah Michelle Gellar said, Cruel was very personal to me because it was the first time I'd been given really adult material. Not like that. Now, the third key role would go to Reese Witherspoon. And again, Reese Witherspoon, an actor on the way up at this point, and taking some really interesting roles on at that stage in her career as well. But it did take some persuading to get her involved, because the character of Annette, who she would take on in Cruel Intentions, had been really difficult to cast in the first place. And Ryan Phillip had been going to Roger Kumble's house to read with an assortment of candidates for the part. But the right person had to kind of fit 2 criteria. Number one, it had to be someone Kumble wanted in the film, but also the studio was getting a little bit picky about who it wanted. So Katie Holmes was the studio choice at this point. Smart choice, particularly at that stage as well. And I mean, they still weren't best pleased about the role that Sarah Michelle Gellar was in. And I think Roger Kumble mentioned someone called Vanessa Shaw, who was on her way up at that point as well. But it was Reese Witherspoon, who happened to be in a relationship with Ryan Phillip, who ultimately their attention would zero in on. And so that we're at early 1998 now. And I mean, Reese Witherspoon, I don't know if you ever saw the film Freeway. I mean, that's one hell of a movie to have early on your CV. And it proves that she wasn't averse to edgy material as well. And so she was offered the role of Annette in Cruel Intentions. She turned it down. And she just wasn't happy with it. And so in the end, Kumble would have to rewrite it. And as he told Cosmopolitan, basically, we took Reese out to dinner to get her drunk. And we ended up getting drunk. And he says, I literally got down on my knees and begged her. And Kumble said to Witherspoon, please, it'll be 15 days. You'll be great. And Witherspoon in the end was like, I'll do it, but we need to work on the character. And Kumble, anything. And as he explained, she wanted to strengthen the character, and she was right. And so Witherspoon and Kumble got together and gave Annette more bite. So, quote, she wasn't a doormat. And Kumble says, I'm very grateful to her for that. Now, Selma Blair writes in her memoir, Mean Baby, about the fact that pretty much every young actor knew of this script, Cruel Inventions, at the time. And in her words, in her book, she describes it as a big clucking deal in young Hollywood. I think that's what it says. The font was difficult to read. And she says everyone was talking about it, buzzing about it, speculating about it. Now, it was still, there was a kind of a tricky edge to it, because a lot of the people who were interested in roles in the film were late teens, early 20s. Selma Blair was heading towards her mid-20s at that point. So, I mean, it was a high school movie, but also it's a high school movie with some blue bits to it, some slightly naughty bits to it. And that was causing a degree of concern as well. And so it got to a point where trying to fill the role that Selma Blair took on wasn't really that easy. And she talks in her book about she got to her mid-20s and she was getting bit parts in things, but she really wanted this one. And she felt that if she didn't get Cruel Inventions, it might be time to knock things on the head. And so Blair was the oldest member in the end of the key young ensemble in the film. And Roger Kumble would talk about it was the smartest audition I've ever seen in my career when she went in to read for him. And he says, I remember having to ask all the actors coming in how old they were because of a scene of, I mean, it's a scene of assault. I mean, there's no way around it. I'm going very, very spoiler light, but it's a really unpleasant scene in the film. And so Kumble was like, well, we're going to shoot it, but it's got to be dicey. It's got to be right. And we can't have someone underage in that scene. And so they were auditioning young actors, bringing them in, and he said they were all good. But I remember Selma Blair came in and Kumble said to her, how old are you? And she said, how old are you? And as Kumble said, she was so obnoxious and I couldn't get it out of my head. She came into the audition as the character and didn't show me that there was Selma. And I just said, there's the person. That's who it was. That's the story he told to Cosmo. Now, Selma Blair's take on it in her book says, I did the audition using the same energy he brought out in me. She says, I wasn't angry. I wasn't combative. I was just a little bit fed up. I'd done 7 auditions that week without being noticed. I felt I had nothing to lose. And Blair said, a little mean baby came out of me, but she saved the day because she made him listen. I suppose Roger realised that this was the saving grace of the character of Cecile. She didn't have to be the sad victim. And so a couple of days after the audition, Kumble and Blair would meet a few days later and the deal was done. There were the 4 main members of the cast. Now, Roger Kumble was still a new director. And so, I mean, he put together, Neil Moritz, if we go back to him, he was on a run. He did 7 films in a row, I think, with first-time directors. But, I mean, crucially here, he knew how to put together a production team for a new filmmaker. And he said, we knew Roger was prepared to direct since he'd worked in theatre. But also, they knew that they needed a support team around him, experienced people. So in came Theo van der Sande as the cinematographer. Jeff Freeman comes in to edit. And, I mean, a bunch of experienced people, not least production designer John Gary Steele. And part of the pre-production was getting the look of Cruel Intentions, as you would expect, on a relatively light budget. And what John Gary Steele went for was something against the look of the high school movie a little bit. He wanted it darker. He wanted to reflect the tone of the film and kind of the darker corners that the story was going into. And so, I mean, John Gary Steele, as per the press notes, quote, created an overall look for the film that paid homage to the original novel. This was still based on pre-existing text. The interior sets of the Valmont townhouse were built and shot in LA, but with a bit of a French twist. And as Steele says, most of the story takes place in modern day New York, but when you you walked into the Valmont townhouse, I wanted you to feel like you were walking into a Parisian even ballroom. Darker colours used throughout the film. And Steele saw it as a tragedy, and he wanted to lean into the fact that it was a tragedy. And so that was what was informing his production design of the film. Now, the shoot of Cruel Intentions ran from June the 9th, 1998 to July the 15th, 1998. Just over a month, a fairly thin production, really, based in New York and Los Angeles. It didn't stray out of those two places, really. And the shooting began. It was under that original title, Cruel Intentions. The V would change to a T, but I think Sarah Michelle Gellar posted on her Instagram feed them coming together for a meal the night before the start of shooting, and there is a script with Cruel Inventions written on the front of it. But it was, Witherspoon at this point was talking, she talked to Brian Raftery about a very, very difficult scene that they had to shoot, Ryan Phillip and Reese Witherspoon. And she talked about how I'm going really spoiler light again, we've been living together for a year and a half, and Ryan wanted me to hit him really hard, and I think I hurt his ear. And once filming on this particular really intense argument was complete, Ryan Phillip threw up, vomited. And as he said, I was probably just being a dramatic a-hole and indulging in the moment because it was his real life girlfriend at that point. There was fruity material in the film, and inevitably a burden of responsibility on Roger Kumble and his team. This was an era before intimacy coordinators as well. And as such, when it came to shooting some of those moments, it was a case of you get everything set up and clear the set as much as humanly possible. That's the way they approached it. There's also a very famous kissing scene in Cruel Intentions between Selma Blair and Sarah Michelle Gellar, and that one was on location. It was harder for people not to see it, and it would become a point of contention ahead of the release of the movie. It's also a very, very famous moment in the film, and Blair said in her book, I wasn't that nervous about kissing Sarah, but I was eager for the scene to be over and done with because we both knew it was going to be somewhat sensational and there was pressure on us to pull it off, and we wanted to get it right, certainly. That, how do I put this delicately? The saliva was unplanned. If you've seen the film, you know what I mean. There was also, she said, actually, one instance where I felt remotely cool, because in her book she talks about just almost being in awe of Reese Witherspoon on the set of the film. But there was a moment where, this was a Sony film, and Sony's big summer movie that year was Roland Emmerich's Godzilla. Do you remember that? Written by Dean Devlin, directed by Emmerich, Matthew Broderick leading the cast, and Selma Blair just said the cast and crew went to New York for the bit of the shoot, and one night we all went out to the Godzilla premiere. There's a lovely story that Sarah Smith tells of when she was at Aardman, and Aardman at this point was having its films distributed by Sony Pictures. Sony had Quantum of Solace out and invited the Aardman team down to London to the Quantum of Solace premiere, and as such there's a busload of Aardman people getting changed on the bus to go to a big glitzy James Bond premiere and then back to Bristol. The case of Cruel Intentions, they're getting all dressed up. Prada lent me a dress, said Selma Blair, and then they back off after a night indulging in the joys of Roland Emmerich's Godzilla. Back straight on the set and filming Cruel Intentions. Cost around 11 million in the end to shoot the film and to get the negative locked. Heading into post-production, there were some bumps in getting some of the music that Roger Kumble wanted, but the controversy and the difficulty was going to come with that kiss, and it seems quite quaint now, really, but in 1999, as the film was preparing for its release, this was a really, really big deal, and there was an uproar. Now, behind me are a bunch of old film magazines, including Premiere Magazine, and Premiere Magazine, a brilliant US magazine, much missed, was running like big feature on this kiss, and how, according to Premiere, the movie's sexed up scenes had, quote, launched 1,000 closed door meetings at the WB, because young performers who were in these savoury family shows were now, heaven forbid, they were abrasing each other's clothes. How's that? How would it reflect? What would happen? And so there was a lot of unrest. There was a lot of controversy. And as Roger Kumble remembered as well, when it got to actually the opening weekend for Cruel Intentions, he said there were signs at theatres that said, "We will not sell tickets to Cruel Intentions if you're under 17." Now, this was an R-rated movie, so under American law, you could go if you were under 17, as long as you had someone with you. I remember an adult with you. I remember being in America when Django Unchained opened, the Tarantino film, and going to an American multiplex which just said, "We don't admit under 14s for the 10 p.m. showing." I mean, that's how liberal it all was. But in the American rating system and the American media, violence absolutely fine. A little bit nooky. Oh, no, not allowed that. And so this was triggering the very respectable and absolutely not two-faced press at the time. But by the time it actually got to the release, the WB had relaxed enough to allow the adverts to run. And for Sony, it was rubbing its hands with glee because it had a conversation point. Its film was the most talked about. It only cost $11 million to make. It ramped up the marketing. And I mean, the movie went into cinemas at the start of March 1999. The reception of it was just it's just a bit in the middle, really. I really like the reviews that just criticised it for having some rude bits in it as well. I think it was. I mean, Roger Ebert went for it. He was one of the people who praised it, but generally it was sort of in the middle. That people weren't going out of their way. I always thought Cruel Intentions was quite a smart take on Dangerous Liaisons. And also, I mean, if you're going to go all posh and stuff, made the text of the original book really accessible to people who might not otherwise have given it a try. Still, as always, middling critics. All right, what happens at the box office? So, the American release, March the 5th to the 7th, 1999. I've got the chart here. The opening film at number 1 that weekend was Analyze This, starring Robert De Niro and Billy Crystal, directed by Harold Ramis, wasn't it? Opened with 18.3 million, but Cruel Intentions was in second place with 13 million. Remember, the negative had cost 11. By the time this film was done, it was going to be in profit, even before it got anywhere near the DVD release. Sony had another release the week before, 8mm, which was the edgy Joel Schumacher, Nicolas Cage thriller, which if it had been good, would have been a lot more successful. Other movies around at this point, The Other Sister, Payback, October Sky, My Favourite Martian, Message in a Bottle, underrated Costner film there, Shakespeare in Love, and She's All That, which was another teen movie that cleaned up early in 1999. But Cruel Intentions was off to a good start, and I mean, the word of mouth on it was good enough that the box office drop was just 46% on its second weekend. I'll say the box office drop on Analyze This was just 15%, but still 46%. That's fine. Sony quite happy. On its second weekend, the other big opener was The Rage, Carrie 2. Who remembers that? Exactly. 7 million. Cruel Intentions down to 3. Other films out were The Corruptor, Baby Geniuses, The Deep End of the Ocean, and how about this, the Wing Commander movie? I've got to come to that at some point. Cruel Intentions hung around though. I mean, Ben Affleck and Sandra Bullock in True Crime were out the following week. Clint Eastwood thriller, a really tepid Clint Eastwood thriller, True Crime, was following. But Cruel Intentions was still hanging in the top 10 by the end of March as films like the underrated Ed TV, the film that absolutely had its oxygen taken away by The Truman Show, The Mod Squad, Doug's first movie. But 4 weeks in, Cruel Intentions, 33 million in the bank, still in the top 10. It would finally drop out as things like The Matrix came along, 10 Things I Hate About You. What a year 1999 was. The US, in the end, the US box office returns for Cruel Intentions, by the time it had done, 38 million at the US box office, 37 million overseas, 75 million total worldwide for this modest 11 million film, and then a big DVD hit as well. A big DVD hit. Enough that there were plans for more of this. So off the back of the success of Cruel Intentions, efforts went into a spin-off TV series that was going by the name of Manchester Prep. However, after 3 episodes of this were made, and Amy Adams is in it, it's sort of a prequel thing, Manchester Prep. Amy Adams cast in it, decided, no, don't want the TV series. And so it was cobbled together into a straight-to-DVD sequel to Cruel Intentions, which came out in 2001. Then a few years later, 2004, we got another straight-to-DVD sequel, Cruel Intentions 3. None of these films had any of the original cast involved. However, Cruel Intentions 2 was written and directed by Roger Kumble. He didn't direct the third film. And then there have been all sorts of other attempts to bring this back. So there has been a musical that came out in 2015. There was another attempt to bring it to television in 2015. I think it got a pilot order that, but they never got taken to a full series. And now there is, courtesy of Prime Video, a new reboot series, which again, Roger Kumble is, he's on the outskirts of, really. That came out on Prime Video in 2024. And, for all the conversation around it, it's still the original Cruel Intentions that continues to cut through. A lot of the controversy about it is quite quaint now, but I sort of miss this era where a film that grossed 80-90 million at the worldwide box office is still being talked about, is still being explored, 30 odd years later. And there is like a gap. Films like this, I'm recording this in the summer of 2025, films like this aren't made very often now. I think they should be. I think as much as Blumhouse has managed to commandeer the idea of making horror films for under $10 million, can someone have a go at making like comedies like this or dramas like this, similar kind of budget, get them into cinemas and see what happens? Worked out quite well, after all, for Cruel Intentions. And that brings me to the halfway point of this latest episode of Film Stories. As always, thank you so much for listening and thank you for your time. Just a few parish notices, a few things coming up, actually, which I'm going to give plugs to. Firstly, though, if you like this podcast and don't mind giving it a bit of support, if you head to patreon.com/SimonBrew and put some coins in the pot there, then you get the podcast early and ad-free pretty much every time you find out the gossip of what we're up to behind the scenes. Thank you to everyone who supports me there. Hopefully some extras coming your way soon too. It costs you nothing to subscribe to the podcast at your podcast home of choice, and it also costs nothing to leave ideally a hugely positive review. If you could do those, I'm an independent. Stuff like that is like gold dust to me. If you want me to bore you in person, there are a couple of options ahead of you. On Friday the 12th of September 2025 in Birmingham, I'm hosting Jenny Nelson and Mark Kermode for an evening conversation at the Midlands Arts Centre in Birmingham. And then on the 17th of January, it's my own show, Film Stories Live, 90 minutes of me, 1 or 2 filmmaking guests, me nerding on about films. That's also at the Midlands Arts Centre. If you want tickets to those, be lovely to see you. Go to macbirmingham.co.uk, search for Film Stories. Both of those events would pop up, as well as another one coming towards the end of September, which I've not announced yet. There's also stuff coming in November in both Birmingham and London, which I'll be announcing in due course too. And we're hard at work on new issues of Film Stories and Film Junior magazines. These are print film magazines. Film Stories is the UK's biggest, our flagship title, 168 pages of movie nerdisms. And then there's Film Junior magazine for under 15s as well. The only magazine I know of anything like it. I mean, I don't think there's anything else out there. Store.filmstories.co.uk. They're really expensive to put in newsagents, so we do them primarily mail order. Store.filmstories.co.uk. Now that I'm going to move to the second half of this episode, and it's a little bit of an extra because someone I've been trying to track down for a long time, that sounds terrible, is writer-director Akiva Schafer of the Lonely Island Group, the director of Popstar, Never Stop, Never Stopping, did the Chip and Dale film a couple of years ago as well. But I spoke to him ahead of the release of the now in cinemas new take on The Naked Gun. Now, The Naked Gun stars Liam Neeson, Pamela Anderson, was going to be directed by Seth MacFarlane once upon a time. Seth MacFarlane nonetheless brought him in and onto the project and remains a producer. But I spoke to Akiva Schafer about the movie. I'm going to set this conversation up with a clip from the trailer of the film, and you'll hear my conversation with Akiva the other side of this.
Thanks. Once you kill a man for revenge, there's no going back. A voice in your head sang over and over, "That was awesome."
Who are you?
Drebin. Detective Frank Drebin. Thanks.
Police Squad has always been the elite of the elite.
Hi, Daddy. It's me, Frank Jr. Love you.
Hey, Dad. Boy, do I miss you.
Hello, Akiva Schafer. How are you?
Hi, I'm fine. I'm in Los Angeles.
I'm in the West Midlands, in my room, which I've tidied up especially for you, as you can see.
Yeah, you got a sweet Kermit there, and
yes, I've garroted Kermit the Frog for the occasion.
Hoarding a lot of magazines.
It's a lot of very old film magazines.
That's
very old film magazines. I have to ask, what have you got against Ponzi schemes? I don't want to give away I don't want to give away the jokes in your films, but I mean that was the one that had me absolutely roaring to myself. They're going to come for you. You know this.
I don't want to give it away either, but I want to ask you a follow-up. No, I don't. I guess I can't. But do you know? Nah, it'll ruin it every way.
Yes, I saw where you were going with it. I'm not going for the spoiler. I've decided though, you put more detail into your film than Francis Ford Coppola, because everyone must point this out to you. Because on the same day I watched Naked Gun, I watched The Godfather Part 3. And it's quite interesting how you both approach newspapers, because I'm a boring nerd, and if there's a newspaper on a screen, I'm going to read the article. I'm going to have a look. And you really went for it. You went with your vague headline to describe incident.
You're the first person. Well, because you're the only one who's able to pause it, I guess, because they must.
I didn't pause it. No. I saw it straight away when I watched it on a massive.
In that super fast shot, you were able to.
Yeah, I just zero in on the same day. I watched The Godfather 3. And there's a newspaper headline of the Financial Times, where Michael Corleone's doing some proposal, and they've just used the text in the newspaper of the Iraq War kicking off, and they've not bothered to update it. And you put in the extra detail. So there is a question to it, because your commitment to if you're going to do a film like this, your commitment to detail presumably has to be really, really rich, going well beyond well beyond the screenplay itself. Can you talk to me about that enormous list of people on the end credits and how they collaborate with you?
Yeah, well, first off, the dream of when you are doing all those details is that somebody like yourself bothers to notice them.
If you want boring, nerdy people, just send it all to me. I'll do it.
Because I mean, I've put details in things where I never hear back about it, and I go, "Did anyone notice? I wonder if anyone ever noticed." And so that's awesome. The list in these credits is, well, first of all, it's a very long credits for one reason, which is that we shot the main movie in Atlanta, and there's a first unit and then a second unit. So all of a sudden you have two whole crews. But then, because it's an LA movie, we also shot in LA to shoot some stuff here outside.
Yeah.
And that's a whole new crew and then a whole new second unit. So you essentially have 4 movie credits in a row. So that's why there's so many people in that end credits. But it also gave me a lot of space to do like that song that I don't want to spoil, that's during the end credits, and some visuals that were nice, paying homage to the old one, and blah, blah. It gave me a lot of real estate to add more jokes and stuff like that. So I didn't mind the extra long credits. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of a speech I would give in the beginning to production design, being like, here's the thing, it has to all look, first off, the speech is like, this is not a comedy from your guys' perspective. From the music has to be serious music. The sets have to look like they're ripped right out of a Tony Scott movie. Like none of this, none of the comedy is on the walls or on the actors' faces or in the music or in the lighting. That stuff's all that's what makes Naked Gun, and not a different kind of cop movie or cop comedy. That being said, sometimes something is wrong and there is a joke in the background or a joke in the set. But the reason that joke hopefully will play as funny is because everything feels so real. And like you've seen it 1,000 times before, like the police squad building, the
Yes.
interior of should feel like, the one from Beverly Hills Cop 2, to say the Tony Scott one, but also from Seven and
Yeah.
from Point Break from the FBI. It should just have this feeling like yes, I've seen this 1,000 times and this looks just like it.
But if I'm like 344th person down on your credits list, for instance, and I come up with a really good joke and I get that to you, is that like music to your ears?
I have one really good example, but it's from the production designer, so it's not that far down the list. There's a scene that's in the trailer, so I don't mind ruining it, where Frank gets gifted an electric car and he's checking it out for the first time. And when he makes the car drive forward, he hasn't unplugged it, and so it's ripping all the electric chargers out of the ground. And then eventually those high power wattage cables, the voltage cables, go up to the wall and rip the transformer off the wall and rip part of the wall. And the original way that me and Dan Greger and Doug Mann, the two guys I wrote the movie with, the original way we wrote it was all that same stuff. But when it ripped the wall down, it was the police squad gym and pool was what the wall said. And so on the other side was a pool. So it was supposed to be like you'd have to get one of those 10,000 gallon tanks. And it was supposed to be this, like when you break a fish tank in a movie and all the, like in the first Mission Impossible, when he puts, fish tank comes spilling out and all the fishies are flopping. We wanted it to be like that, but giant, with a bunch of, police officers in Speedos flopping around on the ground, spilling out. And I do think that would have been funny, but as we were trying to figure out how to accomplish it, because we wanted to do that scene practically as well, like meaning not using any visual effects, meaning do it for reals like they would have in the 90s. And so we did ultimately, that scene in the movie has no visual effects. It is just 100% real. And the water was going to be a problem. The reset on that, if
you're suddenly making Titanic, aren't you?
You can't have stunt guys like submerged in water, waiting in a tank, not breathing, then getting flopped out. So they were going to have to be wet next to the water, and then the water was going to dump, and they were going to jump into the water, and then what if you need to do it again? You have to dry everything and refill, and how do you refill a tank that size in a speedy manner? Plus, you have to rebuild the wall, and I mean, it was just so much stuff. And we had figured out a lot of it, like that's a parking garage. And where the hole is in real life a giant hole where you drive your car in. So they just completed the wall, and it had the space behind it because it's a parking garage, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, long story short, Bill Bretsky, the production designer, was like, what if it was the prison instead and a bunch of criminals ran out? And I think that's such a better joke anyways.
Yeah.
It's so much more irresponsible that a bunch of prisoners. And that is like, I think that's the best and most the greatest joke that came from the list of credit from a collaborator that was not one of the three writers.
I'd be fascinated to see you make an Aardman movie. That would be quite interesting. Just
make
like
a which kind of movie?
An Aardman movie where you've got 5 years to put every last detail into the background of it. I think that would be that would be. Can I ask just about that trailer? 5 minutes before that trailer's released to the world, where's your headspace? Because that the first moment where we're all going to see, and you're remaking something,
the first teaser trailer. Well, I was really happy with that teaser because it kind of answered all the big questions in a minute, right? Or 90 seconds.
The big questions, particularly.
And those were the questions, like, when they came to me, Paramount and the Fuzzy Door people, like the Seth MacFarlane camp, and said, hey, would you be interested in taking on a new Naked Gun? And my first instinct was like, of course not, because it's a perfect movie and you can't ever be better than it. Like the rule is you're supposed to like take something like 21 Jump Street, which was a TV show that was cheesy and dramatic, and make the comedy version
Steven
of that.
Soderbergh always said remake bad films, didn't he? That was like
I didn't realize he said
then he did Solaris.
But he's dead right. And why would you try to do that to Naked Gun, which is a perfect movie and also like impossible to recreate? And Leslie Nielsen is a unicorn that you'll never if you chase him, you'll never get anywhere close. And the second part of their thing was Liam Neeson's interested. And that was where I was like, and that just represented it just opened the whole thing up to me, because I was like, oh, I see how I can make something that honors the original, takes the spirit of it, but is completely new. So the first week, though, you go, what are the things that would do that? And I'm like, well, let's not make him Frank Drebin, because if he's Frank Drebin, then he's chasing Leslie. Let's make it that he's his son, so that it separates it, so that Liam can be Liam, and we can just play with how he does stuff, and we can pay respect to Leslie and to the old movies. And it's not in the teaser. This is a bit of a spoiler, but he says, I want to be just like you, but also completely different than original. And that's kind of the thesis statement for a movie like this. And of course, it's completely impossible. But and then everyone would ask, oh, you're gonna do Naked Gun, what are you gonna do about OJ? And so like that first week kind of answered all that. And what's the movie gonna look and feel like? Is it gonna feel throwback, or is it gonna feel new? And so that first teaser trailer kind of had all those questions answered. So to answer your question about what it was like, it was scary, but then the fact that everyone it felt like the audience picked up on every one of those things and said, and understood the take and the assignment. So I was very relieved, I would say.
You mentioned before about the electric car coming out, and there's a bit there where someone who looks akin to Hannibal Lecter comes out. It's also in one of the trailers. It's the only time that I can remember in the film, thinking about it, where you lean into directly referencing another film. And there may be other tiny bits in there, but the way that spoofs went for a long time was something like Fatal Instinct. I love Carl Reiner, but Fatal Instinct was, it's enough to recreate a scene from a movie, and it's just like, oh, look, that's the same. What rules were you putting when you were actually writing it? What weren't you allowing you to do?
Well, similar to the first Naked Gun, part of what, obviously we were watching it over and over, trying to kind of unravel the magic trick of it and figure out why it was working. And part of what I was really impressed with coming back to it as an adult and somebody who's in the business now, was the discipline of staying in the genre. That as much as I enjoy the Saturday Night Fever scene in Airplane, that's a different movie and it's really funny, but you're stuck in an airplane, and then that gives you this nice breath of fresh air, because you don't want to be stuck in that airplane. And part of what impressed me about Naked Gun, the original one, I say that because the third one does go into the Untouchables, and Thelma and Louise, and Escape from Alcatraz, and all kinds of shit. The first one doesn't do that ever. Like it's referencing other films, but in a much more overall genre way, right? It has a line from Double Indemnity. It has a scene from Telephone, the Charles Bronson movie. It's evoking Day of the Jackal in some general sense. It's, you know what I mean? It has a few lines of dialogue that are directly like Dirty Harry dialogue. But it is not ever going into, and it veers during the love montage, it veers into just like general 80s montage spoof, but it is not doing one-to-one where like suddenly they're in
I get it.
Another movie ever. It is a detective story through and through, and stays in it. And so right away we were like, that's ours too. We're not going to all of a sudden be in a scene from the Barbie movie or something for no reason. So that was a rule that we self-imposed in that way.
On top of your head, Akiva Schafer, I have noticed you've got a Naked Gun 2.5 hat on.
I do.
And there's a reference in that film, and it goes to the same question, really, because one of the things watching your movie, there isn't anything, outside possibly one thing, that would date it to a certain time, specifically, a reference to a certain time. And I remember watching Naked Gun 2.5, and there's a picture of Michael Dukakis on the wall. And no one in the UK, even at the time, had any idea what it was. I wonder when it comes to like just referencing contemporary things in there, did you set yourself similar rules?
Yeah, well, it's funny because I consider those movies so timeless, but you are right. They have George W. Bush right at the beginning, and the first one starts with all those world.
Yeah, but the Dukakis moment only works if you know who he is.
And Dukakis is really Yeah, Dukakis is it's on the wall of disasters in the blues
That's
bar where
right.
everything's at. It's
Yeah.
like next to the Hindenburg and stuff. Um, yeah, I am aware of that, but then sometimes a joke's just too good, and I bet you that was the same
Yeah.
thing they were dealing with. And I didn't,
Yeah, I'm not
I
dunking
spent
on
an
this.
afternoon with David Zucker, but there's all kinds of questions like I wish I had thought to ask him, like how much did you guys try? Because the movie's mainly timeless, but then sometimes they can't resist throwing in something like
Yeah.
that. And I'd say the same applies to us. We mainly tried to make it timeless, but sometimes we just like to joke too much and had to do it. But I will say, I think all the references we have to like things that are pop culture or topical are already extremely dated. So in that way, like I don't think
So
any
that
of the ones
works.
we're
Yeah.
doing are from today the way Dukakis was. Everything we're doing is from the last 20 years. So they're
So
already
if
old.
you do another one, you just need to get a Dukakis picture in the background. That's the way it works.
Yeah, that'll work perfect.
Yeah, I mean, just one thing about the way David Zucker directed the first two films, that it was fairly notable that, I mean, that he was doing as many takes as David Fincher on his films. He would do
Was
20,
he?
30. Yeah, yeah. On the original
Another
film, he
thing
would,
I wish I had asked him because watching it, you're like, oh my God,
yeah.
this is perfect. And so much of it is done in a coverage where there isn't a cut. And
Yeah,
yet the
so he was doing
timing is
20, 30 takes of
well,
certain scenes.
that explains how they did some of it because I'm watching it going, oh my God, how did like there is a show this is I mean, this is a film podcast, so I'm assuming I can be
You go
pretty
for it. Go for it. Yeah.
pretty specific, but there is a moment in the first Naked Gun that I watched so many times, which is right after Frank has been fired and he's
Yeah.
coming back to police squad and he's clearing his desk.
Yes.
And it's all one shot, and there's like 6 jokes in a row. Like one of them of which is as he's clearing the desk, he finds evidence that turns out like, oh wow, it turns out this person was innocent. Here's the
Yeah.
missing
That's
evidence.
right. Yeah, yeah.
And Ed has to be like, oh, he went to the chair 2 years ago, and he's just like, oh, and puts it away. Or there's a great joke about another like edgy joke about like, just imagine now that he's not a cop, next time I shoot someone, I could be arrested or something like that. Anyways, there's a series of jokes
That's
and physical
interesting. Yeah.
gags, and there's no cuts.
So there was
And it's
the film.
pitch
The film
perfect.
the film Sneakers came out a few years afterwards, and that's got a similar thing where they're just in a room and the camera just keeps moving around the room, changing the and that shot gets acclaimed. But because it's in a comedy,
Right.
it's just like that's really interesting.
It's the timing of the actors because these jokes have to be timed perfectly. And so with the speed we move these days, oftentimes I get a couple good ones and then I'm like, nah, I got to cut because if someone just has to inhale between the two lines, you're toast. But there are shots in that old one where I'm like, whoa, how did they get that? And if what you're saying is true, that explains it.
I've made up worse things, so if I'm making it up,
Well, it makes me
it's
feel
not the
better.
one. No, it's genuinely true that he would.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's a whole lot of stuff on how he worked with Leslie Nielsen to get the performance as well, which I won't go into here. But it's just like because it's a comedy, often looks effortless. I'm a real thing. I love Bowfinger, for instance, and Bowfinger's an ingenious
so
film.
good.
It's ingenious, but no one gives it credit because
Well, is that kind of the trick of all comedy is that even just like let's apply it to stand-up comedy, you have to feel so if you look nervous or like you're working hard up there, the whole audience will tense up.
Yeah.
The whole point of it is to make it feel like this is the first time you're saying everything and it's just a conversation and you're just up on stage and you couldn't care less if it gets a laugh or not. You're so comfortable because then everyone gets at ease and then you can just enjoy the whole evening. And the same thing for movies, like the whole way to make a comedy work is to make it feel totally easy and like first thought. That's why people lots of times think the actors make up all the lines, like because they're just it's so casual. And then, but it does seem to have that effect that people don't realize the work that went into it.
The name I didn't expect to see on an end credits of a Naked Gun film, Alex Gillis. Just the sheer craft, that great big long list of craft
You're talking about for the puppet, for the owl puppet.
Yeah, Alex Gillis, the alien predator Naked Gun. Just like the
we were
craft
just lucky
that
he was excited to do it. And it's so fun when you get to make a puppet. We have 2 puppets in the movie.
Yeah.
I don't want to ruin them, but the other one was Henson in New York did it.
Yes, I wrote that down as well. I garroted Kermit just for you.
and they both came out like as good as perfect as I could have imagined. And it's just such a treat as a fan of puppets to have an excuse to use puppets in a movie where it's fine that the audience can tell it's a puppet. It just adds to the fun.
Akiva Schafer, thank you very much. Have a lovely day, everybody.
Thank you for spending the time.
Really appreciate that. Thank you. And that was my conversation with Akiva Schafer. The Naked Gun is playing in cinemas around the world now. I really enjoyed it as well. It brings to an end this episode of Film Stories. As always, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for your time. You can get more from me on Blue Sky at Simon Brew, Instagram simon.brew. And then for Film Stories, you'll find us on Blue Sky at Film Stories, Facebook, Film Stories Online, youtube.com/Film Stories. Loads of stuff going on there at the moment. Instagram, Film Stories Magazine UK. Patreon is patreon.com/Simon Brew. The online shop is store.filmstories.co.uk, where you can find magazines, UK exclusive Blu-rays of Bull Durham and No Way Out. Two great films, those great films. And then filmstories.co.uk is our clickbait and AI-free entertainment website. Thanks so much for listening. This is the end of the episode, I'm afraid, or not afraid, depending on how much you've not enjoyed it. I will be back soon with another bunch of film stories. Until then, thanks for listening. Thank you for your time. And ta-ta for now. Bye-bye. Still here? Okay, this is the post-credits sting, the little bit extra for you. I'm not about to join the Avengers or anything like that. I had intended to take another week or two away, but I brought this podcast back a little bit early because all sorts of things going on in personal life. I think I've mentioned before in one of these post-credits stings, my dad just isn't well at all at the moment, and so I've kind of done a hybrid episode this week, which I'm thrilled to do. It was a delight to talk to Akiva Schafer, so it's going to be this just for the next week or two. I've got an interview and a film story in an episode, and then I'm going to get back into things. The full flow of things is the plan, starting at the very beginning of September. I'm building up to Film Stories 500, which is quite an emotional landmark for me, in that I started Film Stories about a week or two after my mum died. And I mean, it's weird. I'm coming to episode 500 at a point where my dad's health just really isn't great at all. So I'm going to be doing an event in London. I'm going to be doing an event in Birmingham in November, and I've got a couple of very special episodes as well, a couple of interviewees. So basically, there's going to be about 4 or 5 episodes, 500 at this rate. It's tougher and tougher to be an independent, though. I've gone into this a little bit over time, but it's just like, if I hadn't launched Film Stories when I did, it would be very, very hard to get noticed now. I have to say that the way Google is treating websites and trying to help indies get noticed, well, it's just non-existent, really, and it is incredibly difficult. I'm quite happy to answer questions about this if anyone has them. Get me on Blue Sky at Simon Brew. I might do a couple at the end of one of these episodes. I appreciate a load of people have got my back at the moment. I just want to say I do feel it and I do know it, and I wish it wasn't needed, but I'm kind of glad you're there, and thank you very much. I'm going off to watch more movies now and perhaps have a little bit of wine or coffee, one or the other. It'll be a surprise. Thanks for making it through the post-credit sting. Let me give let me do something extra. There's a film coming up called I Swear, which really got me, actually. I'm embargoed from actually writing a review, but they've used my quote in the trailer, which I didn't know was going to happen. I'm not really one for having my name on posters and things like that. You get asked when you've gone to see a film if you want to leave a poster quote, and sometimes I usually decline, but it was a surprise. And there's a bit in the film where a really tiny specific bit in the film, which is what led to the line that they've used in the trailer, and I can't talk about it for spoilery reasons just yet, but keep an eye on that film when it comes out in October. I think there's a lot in it to talk about, and I look forward to talking about it more. For now, though, wine.